Imagine waking up to the life you've built shattering before your eyes, your wife, the woman you trusted, not only betraying you but plotting to take everything from you, your money, your kids, and your home. Worse, she demands that you watch as she shares your life with other men. What would you do? For Jack, the tipping point was more than just betrayal, it was a challenge he couldn't ignore. What happens next is a storm of violence, revenge, and a disappearance that no one could have predicted. This is Jack's story. Jack never saw it coming. A successful general sales manager, he had built his life around his family, his wife Susie, and their two kids, Emily and Max. His job was demanding, but Jack always made time for the people he loved. They had it all: a beautiful home, vacations, and a seemingly perfect family dynamic. Every Sunday afternoon, they'd sit down as a family for dinner, laughing and enjoying life as if there were no worries in the world. But beneath the surface, things were different. Jack, while working hard to provide, had started noticing small cracks in his marriage with Susie. It started with subtle things. Susie had begun staying late at work, making excuses for why she couldn't attend family events or spend time with Jack. The familiar intimacy between them slowly faded. At first, Jack brushed it off. She was busy with her job as an accountant, after all. But as the days went by, his instincts began to nag at him. Her phone became off limits, and she spent more time out of the house. Jack's mind raced. Was she seeing someone else? Was there something he wasn't seeing? The once strong bond between them now felt fragile, like it could break at any moment. One evening, Jack stumbled upon a text message on Susie's phone. His heart sank. It was from Paul Jenkins, her boss. The text was innocuous, nothing that screamed infidelity, but Jack's gut told him something wasn't right. He couldn't ignore it any longer. That night, after the kids went to bed, Jack confronted Susie. The truth he had been dreading was finally revealed. "I'm sorry, Jack, but I've been seeing Paul." For months, Susie admitted, her voice eerily calm. Her eyes avoided his as if she had already detached herself from the situation. Jack was stunned, betrayed. The woman he thought he knew had been living a double life. As he stood there, reeling from the shock, Susie's cold words hit him like a slap. "I never wanted to hurt you, Jack, but I don't love you anymore." The revelation of Susie's affair with Paul Jenkins shattered Jack's world. The man he had trusted, his wife, the mother of his children, had been lying to him for months. Jack's heart pounded with anger and disbelief. How could she betray him like this? How could she share their life with another man? But what made it worse was how easily Susie justified her actions. "You're always working, Jack. I needed someone who would make me feel alive again," she said, as if the affair was just an unfortunate byproduct of their busy lives. She spoke as though it were a minor inconvenience, but Jack knew deep down this was much bigger. Susie had been seeing Paul not just as an escape, but as a way to rebuild her life, one where she could be in control, free of the confines of marriage and family. Jack felt like a fool, a man who had been played for so long, not even realizing his wife had drifted so far away from him. Days turned into weeks, and Jack's suspicions grew. He noticed that Susie became even more distant, more cold. She refused to have deep conversations and often mentioned how much she admired Paul. "He understands me better," she'd say nonchalantly. Every word felt like a dagger, each moment a reminder that Jack was losing everything. But it wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about control. Susie had turned her affair into a power struggle, making Jack feel smaller and more insignificant with every passing day. One night, after a particularly heated argument, Jack decided to take matters into his own hands. He began following Susie, tracking her movements, trying to catch her in the act. What he uncovered next would turn his life upside down forever. The night Jack finally uncovered the full extent of Susie's betrayal was the night everything changed. He had followed her to a fancy restaurant, watching from a distance as she met Paul Jenkins. They exchanged warm hugs, their laughter ringing through the night air. Jack's heart sank further as he saw the way they looked at each other like lovers, like they had everything Jack was supposed to have. The pain of seeing Susie so happy with another man was unbearable. He wanted to confront them, to scream and shout, but Jack held himself back. He needed proof, something solid. As Susie and Paul entered a hotel, Jack's worst fears were confirmed. He sat in his car, feeling his soul tear apart, as he watched his wife walk into the hotel with Paul, her lover, her betrayer. The next day, Jack confronted Susie. He was calm, but beneath his composed exterior, a storm was brewing. "How long has this been going on?" Jack asked, his voice steady but tinged with hurt. Susie looked at him, guilt flickering in her eyes, but there was no real remorse. She told him everything, admitting to the affair, to the lies, and even to the plan she had with Paul. Jack's entire world came crashing down. His mind raced, his heart pounding with a mixture of anger and betrayal. But there was more to Susie's plan than just the affair. Jack had no idea how far she was willing to go to take everything from him. It wasn't just the affair. It wasn't even just the lies. Susie had a far darker plan in mind. She wasn't content with just breaking Jack's heart, she wanted to destroy him. Jack learned through a series of cryptic conversations and documents that Susie had been consulting with a lawyer, planning a divorce that would strip him of everything he held dear: their house, the kids, and most importantly, his wealth. Susie had made up her mind. She would leave Jack with nothing. The house, their assets, everything they had built together, it would all belong to her. But that wasn't the worst part. As Jack dug deeper, he realized that Susie wanted something more. She wanted him to watch as she destroyed his life. Her twisted revenge wasn't just about taking the material things, it was about breaking him mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Susie had even gone so far as to try and manipulate Jack into agreeing to a co-parenting plan that would give her full custody of the children. She used their kids as pawns in her game, hoping to break Jack's spirit once and for all. But the final straw was when Susie made a chilling demand. She wanted Jack to watch her with Paul, to see her with other men, as if rubbing his face in the humiliation would finally make him submit. Jack could hardly believe what he was hearing. His wife, the woman he loved, wanted him to suffer in the most twisted way imaginable. But Jack wasn't going to let her win. Not without a fight. The day Susie gave Jack the ultimatum was the day everything changed. Sitting across from each other in their living room, the tension was thick in the air. The kids were at a friend's house, giving Jack and Susie the privacy she needed to deliver her final blow. "Jack," she said, her voice calm but her eyes cold, "I want you to watch me with Paul. If you don't agree, I will make sure you lose everything." Her words were chilling, devoid of any empathy. "You will watch me live the life I want, with Paul by my side, and you'll watch as I take our kids from you." Jack's blood ran cold. He could hardly process what she was saying. This was no longer about love, no longer about the family they had built. This was about power, pure, unadulterated control. The horror of it all hit him in waves. Susie was no longer the woman he had married. She had become something else entirely, a stranger who would go to any length to break him. Jack felt his chest tighten. His anger was rising, but there was no way he could let her have the last word. He had to take control of his life again. The night Jack received Susie's ultimatum, his world shattered into pieces. How could she demand such a thing? To watch his wife, share intimate moments with Paul. It was unbearable, a betrayal too deep to fathom. Jack's mind was a storm of conflicting emotions: anger, confusion, and a desperate desire to hold on to the life he had built. The man he had been, the man who worked tirelessly for his family, was no longer recognizable. He tried to reason with himself, to think logically. But there was no logic to this situation. His wife, the woman he had pledged to spend his life with, had become his tormentor. Susie's words echoed in his mind like a broken record: "You'll watch me with Paul, or you'll lose everything." Jack couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. His thoughts spiraled, and he began to lose himself in a maze of despair. He turned to his best friend Amos, hoping for guidance. But Amos, himself carrying the weight of betrayal from his wife Andrea, didn't know how to help. "Sometimes, man," Amos said, "you just need to take control, no matter what the cost." But Jack wasn't ready for what that meant. His emotional breakdown had him questioning his very identity. Who was he anymore? The man who loved, protected, and built a family. Or had he been just a pawn in Susie's game all along? Each day that passed felt like a test he couldn't pass. Jack's heart felt heavy with the realization that he could lose his children, his home, his future. Worse, he had never felt so alone. But it was in the depths of his despair that a dark realization struck: if he didn't act soon, he would lose everything. Jack had always been a man of patience. He never acted rashly. But as the days went by and Susie's cruel demands weighed on him, something inside him snapped. He could no longer sit idly by and let Susie dictate his fate. The humiliation, the betrayal, it was too much. Every time he saw her, he felt the anger building up inside him, and he knew that if he didn't do something soon, he would lose control. That night, as Susie prepared for another rendezvous with Paul, Jack's mind was set. He couldn't let her tear him apart any longer. It was as if a switch flipped in his brain. He would no longer be the victim. Jack's thoughts were no longer about saving the marriage, they were about survival. He couldn't let her take everything from him, not without a fight. Jack took the matter into his own hands. With the help of Amos, who knew a few people from his past with shady connections, Jack began to set a plan in motion. But it wasn't just about exposing the affair or winning in court, it was about making Susie realize that she had pushed him too far. He knew he couldn't confront Paul directly. That would be too dangerous. But he could make sure that Susie understood the consequences of her actions. No longer did Jack feel helpless. He had power, and he was ready to use it. It wasn't about getting revenge, it was about taking back control. But Jack had no idea that the price of regaining his power would come at a cost too steep to imagine. Jack's plan began to take shape. Amos, who had his own troubled history with betrayal, was more than willing to help Jack get the upper hand. They started gathering information: Susie's schedule, Paul's movements, everything they needed to know to get her where they wanted her. But Jack knew that revenge was a dangerous game. This wasn't just about outsmarting Susie or Paul, it was about outlasting them. He couldn't afford to make any mistakes. Every detail of his plan had to be executed perfectly. And in the dark corners of his mind, a chilling thought took root: what if he didn't just want to expose them? What if he wanted to disappear, to erase Susie from his life completely? Jack's plan involved several key steps. First, he would get Susie to trust him again, or at least make her believe he was still the man she could manipulate. Then, he would confront her in a way that left no room for escape. Jack wasn't afraid of the consequences. He was beyond that now. He had a singular focus: to make her understand that no one, especially not her, could break him. But as Jack's plan took form, the stakes grew higher. Amos, who had helped Jack navigate these murky waters, warned him to be careful. "Revenge changes you, Jack. Don't lose yourself in this." But Jack was too far gone. He no longer recognized the man he had been. The life he had once cherished felt like a distant memory, and the person he was now was a man desperate for retribution. The night of the confrontation arrived. Jack had planned everything meticulously, down to the last detail. He knew Susie would be meeting Paul at the usual hotel, a place they'd used before. Jack arrived first, quietly, making sure no one saw him. He waited for hours, his thoughts racing. His heart pounded in his chest, but Jack knew he couldn't back out now. This was it. When Susie arrived, she was accompanied by Paul. They walked into the hotel, unaware that Jack was watching from the shadows. Jack felt a strange mixture of anger and calm. It was as though time itself had stopped. Everything in his life had led to this moment. He had to make Susie pay for what she had done to him. But as he watched them disappear into the hotel, something unexpected happened. Jack didn't storm in to confront them. Instead, he stayed hidden, watching them from a distance. His anger boiled, but something else came over him, something darker, something he couldn't explain. When Susie and Paul emerged hours later, there was no sign of Jack. He had vanished, leaving no trace behind. It wasn't just Susie who would disappear that night, it was everything. The life Jack had built, the man he used to be, the love he had for Susie, it was all gone. When the police arrived the next day, they found nothing. No body, no evidence of any struggle. Susie had simply disappeared without a trace. Jack had never imagined his life would end up like this. Susie had disappeared, and the investigation had gone nowhere. The police had no leads, and the rumors around town started swirling. People whispered about the possibility of Jack being involved, but there was no proof. The one certainty was that Jack was now a man without a past. He had gotten everything he wanted: control, revenge, and an end to Susie's manipulation. But it came at a cost. Jack had won, but at what price? His children were still in his care, but the toll of his actions weighed heavily on him. He could never forget the look in Susie's eyes when she told him to watch her with Paul. It haunted him. But the disappearance? That was something else entirely. Jack found himself alone, not just physically, but emotionally. The man he had once been the loving husband and father was gone. In his place stood a man who had done things he could never undo. Was it worth it? He would never know. Thanks for watching this intense story. If you liked it, please make sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe to stay updated on the next thrilling tale.